We're at the roundtable session for today, the afternoon session. So in one of the keynotes earlier this morning, one of the speakers, Noah Sobi, said when we talk about transforming education, it's important to think about how people learn along the entirety of their lives. So to that end, this roundtable discussion is titled Making Lifelong Learning Possible Through Linkages, K-12 and Beyond. And so we have four amazing discussants today here who are educators working in different spheres with slightly different roles for education for sustainable development and also climate education and project-based learning. So we'll discuss some of the various elements and approaches that can facilitate long-lasting learning, knowledge, skills, and traits. So the format of this session is going to be, I will allow around 5 minutes for each of our speakers to introduce themselves and share a bit about their work. And then we'll go through a few questions for the discussants to go over. And then after that, we'll allow for audience Q&A. So our four discussants today, I think there's a little bit of a lag, but hopefully you can see our screen. Our four discussants are here today. We're going to start with Dr. Nick Kleese. Nick, if I can ask you to introduce yourself and go into your presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Haein. And thanks to all the organizers and for folks being here on a Friday afternoon. We've gotten 1.5 feet of snow in the past couple of days in Minneapolis. So it brings me a lot of joy to know that there are folks who live in places that haven't got 1.5 feet of snow. I'm excited to be in conversation with y'all. Like Haein said, my name is Nick Kleese. I'm a former high school English teacher and nature educator, and I'm currently serving as the Director of Community Engagement at the Center for Climate Literacy at the University of Minnesota. And ahead of our conversation, I want to do two things. One is to share the center's definition of climate literacy, and two, talk through very briefly of what our work looks like on the ground. And Haein, if you could advance the slide just one, I would appreciate it. At the Center for Climate Literacy, we define climate literacy as an understanding that harmonizes multiple ways of knowing. So on the one hand, that's explicit and objective knowledge, or more empirical and scientific. And on the other hand, that's tacit and subjective knowledge, or more interpretive and literary. And we combine those two into a lived and emotionally charged and personally felt understanding of the climate predicament that we're in. And so this definition of climate literacy includes climate science knowledge, but it centers the humanities with a focus on developing values and attitudes and behavioral change aligned with how we should be living in regards to the earth. And so at the center, we believe that this type of literacy is best cultivated across disciplines, across grade levels, across life stages, in and out of the classroom, all through engagement with story. And if we could advance the slide just one more time, I think I've just got one more slide. And stories we find to be very useful here and vital, because they are the most information-dense, multifaceted, flexible, and universal tools that we have as human beings for conveying and deliberating our sense of the world. Stories happen everywhere, and thus they allow climate literacy education to happen everywhere. And these can be brief engagements with stories too. They can be picture books, comics, oral stories, music videos, clips from Frozen 2, anything that's narrative. It can be the vehicle by which learners apply what they already know about climate science to their thinking about relationships, culture, politics, ethics, society, emotions. And this allows for interdisciplinary and intergenerational learning, but it also creates this mass decentralized community of learners who understand both the science and how the science reveals the living toll of the crisis, but also the opportunity to transform our civilization. And so in short, we think of climate literacy as happening through stories, and in doing so, allowing us to imagine otherwise. In practice, what this looks like on the ground is that we work with, right now, primarily educators to equip them with the resources and understanding they need to implement climate literacy education in their specific context. And our definition of educator is pretty broad. So this includes educators in the community, elders, caregivers, gardeners. But for the most part right now, based on the infrastructure we have at the center, it's primarily with K-12 teachers and elders. We've been working with retirement communities, and it's been a blast. We offer workshops and institutes for those folks. We have a year-long fellowship program in which teachers can develop materials for their particular classrooms. We have a website called Climate Lit that serves as a hub of book reviews and lesson plans. We also have a scholarly journal. We just launched our first issue a couple weeks ago called Climate Literacy and Education. And we publish critical articles, reflections, multimedia, and curriculum. And it's all super short so that educators can just like grab it and go and implement it. And to the extent that our funding allows, educators are paid to do this work. And we see this as being crucially important and hopefully transformative, given the amount of unpaid and underpaid labor that educators are already asked to do. So that's our model is compensated, collaborative, and cooperative. And it's for that reason that I'm excited to be here with y'all and to be in conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. I know there will be a lot of questions, but for now, we'll go through the presentations and we'll come back. But thank you for sharing that and also sharing the resource and the model under which your programs work. Thank you. Next to our discussant is Karli Honebein. Karli, if you can introduce yourself and share a bit about your work.
Definitely. Hello, everyone. My name is Karli Honebein. I'm the program coordinator at the Gonzaga Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about what the center does and how we're trying to support climate literacy and sustainable education in Spokane, Washington, which is where Gonzaga University is. You could go to the next slide. So what I want to focus on today a little bit is talking about one of the models we use, which is students teaching students. But before we get into that, a little bit about the Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment. We have been founded to provide resources and opportunities to meet the unprecedented challenges facing humanity and the wider natural environment in the 21st century. And that takes a lot of different forms. But for my work in particular, that means working with students, both undergraduates and K-12 students and educators who work with those students to talk about what climate literacy means for them and how they can bring it into their classrooms in a way that's appropriate for where we live, for the age of the students they work with, and in a way that's relevant, that the students are going to gravitate towards and feel is an authentic experience for them. Next slide. So in particular, I want to talk about the Climate Literacy Fellows, which is one of the ways that we work with students and teachers here at the Climate Center. So the fellows were developed as a partnership with the Washington State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and a special program called Climb Time. And so we hire and train undergraduate students to deliver high impact climate literacy lessons in K-8 classrooms. And so we're hoping to help teachers and students develop foundational scientific understandings about climate, but also understand the cultural, economic, and ethical issues related to climate. And so we have a definition of climate literacy on the slide about understanding how climate influences them and how they influence the climate, whether that's through a scientific understanding or broader cultural understandings. One of the things that we really love to do is our students write the lessons that they take into the classrooms with them. And so we train our students on best practices for teaching climate change, but then let them decide what students in Spokane probably care about. And so all of our lessons focus on hands-on science learning. So we bring materials and kits into the classrooms. All of them feature student-driven inquiry. So they all have 10 to 15 minutes to do explorations, whether that's with kits, with their peers, learning about a new topic. And most of our lessons are also place-based, so localizing the impacts of climate change so that students know what they're going to be seeing in their backyard happening to their families and their communities. So next, I want to highlight some pictures of some student work. All of our interactions with students, we try and get some student work and student voice. And so the first one I love, it's a student who is making connections between what they're learning in the classroom about renewable energy and not wasting energy. And so the lesson is about renewable energy, how it's produced, what we make here in Washington, and how it can transform the economy. But you can see that their learning is absolutely going to transfer home to their parents. Don't waste energy. They've got like a little picture of money there, like, and you can just tell that this is something a student's going to take home with them. In the bottom, you can see a student who was engaging with another renewable energy lesson, and you can see that they're imagining what the future could look like if we had renewable energy. There's solar panels on the house, right? And they're imagining what their future could be. And so it's a really powerful way for students to broaden their scientific understanding to encompass other parts of their life. And so the last one is my favorite. It's simple and to the point. And the student drew this for us on Earth Day last year, and I have it hanging in my office. And I like it because it's a reminder that the students, they know what we're talking about. This was drawn by a fourth grader. And so they may have some problems spelling climate, but they got the gist of what we were saying. And the other really excellent thing is this student to student model where undergraduates are engaging directly with elementary students and middle school students shows them a pathway to higher education. For a lot of the students in our area, sometimes that's not a pathway that they think is available to them. And so providing interactions with young people who are in college, who are studying the sciences and doing something because they care about the environment really broadens their horizons and opens new opportunities and ideas to them about what they could do with their life after they leave school.
Thank you so much, Karli. I think one of the things that a few participants brought up since yesterday is just the use of different medium for communicating different stories, different knowledge, what has been more personal to the students. It's really great to see the artwork of students directly from your work. So thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
Thank you. Next, we have Laura. Laura Tang, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I can also share my screen so I have quite a few slides so I can advance them.
Please feel free to share if you'd like.
Can you see that?
Let me stop. Yes, we see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Tang, and I'm the Center Coordinator at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education, Center for Professional Learning. The world is full of complex problems, including climate change, which demand truly ambitious approaches to education, such as hands-on transformative climate education. So I'm really excited to be here today with all of you and talking about the different roles that we can play in this. We really believe that if we expect ambitious learning and climate education for students, then we really need to support ambitious learning for teachers so that they can have the knowledge, skills, and capacities that they need to do this work. And I'm really excited to be sharing about one of our programs that we've designed for this and that I've been thrilled to be a facilitator and now to be researching as well. So here at Penn, we have this deep expertise in research on project-based learning. Many educators are familiar with more direct approaches to teaching, but what about teaching that goes beyond lecturing, where students can not just learn about climate change, but really engage in climate justice projects themselves? So throughout work at Penn GSE, we've identified 4 driving goals and 10 core teaching practices of project-based learning, where students collaborate with each other on problems that are authentic to themselves and to their communities. And then at the University of Pennsylvania, beyond our School of Education, we have scholars and practitioners exploring climate justice across all different disciplines. So we were really excited to be able to combine these 2 areas of expertise in this teaching approach of project-based learning with the global climate justice expertise of scholars and practitioners, and created the Project-Based Learning for Global Climate Justice Certificate Program. And this was really designed for educators in the K-12 space, as well as in higher education, to learn about how they could engage their students in authentic, action-oriented, and meaningful learning experiences. So we kicked off the first completely virtual iteration of this program in September of 2022. And we were thrilled to have more than 100 educators from over 20 different countries enroll in this program. And it's divided into 3 parts. So in part 1, the teachers are really the learners themselves, and they explore resources to deepen their own understanding of climate justice issues and learn about how scholars and practitioners from different disciplines all engage with these different issues. In part 2, in Vision, educators participate in design sprints to learn about the principles of project-based learning and sketch out project ideas that are relevant and authentic to their own local contexts and their classrooms and students. And then finally, in part 3, Enact, educators implemented their projects with their students, whether it's over the course of days or weeks or months. And at the same time, also engaged in these virtual meetings with each other, other educators in the program, and with facilitators as they reflect on their own experiences, but also navigate these challenges and questions that came up that they didn't necessarily anticipate in the design phase, and work through these together. So from this, we've learned a lot. First, this importance of centering authenticity. We find that it's really important to have this authentic question for students to really explore that matters to them, to have an authentic product that they can create and an impact that they can create that's real. These elements come together to form an authentic project that students can really be compelled and motivated by. And then to integrate expertise, project-based learning asks students to do real disciplinary work on complex issues. So this requires disciplinary experts from teachers as well, which it can be their own that they draw on, as well as the expertise of collaborators, colleagues, community members. And then sharing examples, we find that not many teachers have experienced this type of hands-on climate education for themselves, or even seen it in action in other classrooms. So having participants really our participants really appreciated being able to see example lesson plans, having templates to structure their ideas, and exchanging resources like assessments. And then finally, collaboration. Just like PBL encourages students to collaborate, teacher collaboration, we found, was just really essential for project success. And we found that teachers really benefited from meeting in small groups and appreciated having this as a source of learning, motivation, accountability for them as they work towards these ambitious teaching and learning goals. So yeah, we're super thrilled to be offering this and learning from this. We're learning so much and really excited to hear about how educators have been transforming their practices from this as well. So if you're interested in learning more, there's our website, and you can also enroll in our next cohort, which is starting this fall.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think there are already a few comments in the chat wanting to know more details about your program. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do that. For now, Lucia Rodriguez, we have our last discussant. Lucia, if you can introduce yourself and share about your MDP program. Thank you.
Need to unmute.
Lucia,
I think you're on mute, Lucia.
But we see your slides.
Okay.
So
you see the slides. Okay, good.
Yeah, but if you want to go to the front.
There it is. Okay, good. So I am Lucia Rodriguez. I am the director of the MDP Secretariat, which is MDP stands for Masters in Development Practice. I am housed, or I sit at the UN SDSN. And before that, we were at Columbia University. So we have a very close relationship with them, since Jeffrey Sachs was or is the intellectual founder of the MDP. So I'm going to talk to you about the MDP, which is really, I've been hearing a lot about the students, the teachers, and so we deal more with people that are outside that traditional field. They may be engineers, they may be accountants, so really, and definitely educators as well, but the majority are outside of that field. And so just to get us so that we're clear in terms of what what this graduate degree program is. It's definitely, it incorporates the SDGs, but at the core of it is the Brundtland Commission report definition of sustainable development. And so I just wanted to put it up there, pop it up, just to remind us that we really are talking, we're not specifically as a graduate degree program focused on climate change, but how can you talk about sustainable development without, dealing with climate change and all of the other SDGs? So that, when I have more time, I'll put that definition at the center of this. And then, so because that for us is the field, sustainable development is the field. And then the topics or the areas of study are really all the SDGs. This MDP program was started in 2008. And I say that because 2008, we didn't have SDGs. So we were doing this really under that umbrella of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. And so with the transition, it was perfect. We didn't have to change a lot of things. We just broadened and really focused more on how we are integrating these SDGs into our program. And so what is it? Any graduate degree program, you're gonna have, the knowledge, but this knowledge is very interdisciplinary. And so you get these engineers, you get, lawyers, the medical doctors. And so the core courses that they have to take are natural, social management, and health sciences. And there's a slew of different courses under each of those, but they can choose, they can select. Of course, there's a focus on skills as well, technical, organizational, social, and cultural, and then attitudes. You have to have the attitude in terms of, you have to really be concerned and want to work on the well-being and capabilities of all world citizens. So that's sort of, there's more, but we don't have a lot of time for that right now. So this is the foundation of the MDP. And so what I wanted to say as I've started is mid-career. So it's lifelong learning, really, because these are people who are already coming to us. Some already have their master's degree in another field. And so they want to broaden their horizons. They come to us saying, we need to better understand. We may have an engineer in India who needs to understand how, health is impacting the infrastructure, the roads that he's building in India. And so this is the type of program that fits that person. So they're mid-career, they tend to be between 26 years old and up to 50. So they're older. And we have 30 MDP programs around the world, literally in 26 countries and growing. We don't want to stop at 26, but right now that's what we have. And there's about 6,000 graduates. And so, but education, right? Education for sustainable development is, for me, you got to have that practice. You got to have what Laura was talking about, what everybody was talking about, practice, implementing everything that you're learning. You have to roll up your sleeves, as I say, and have that boot in the ground type of experience. And so we do have that. That is one of the requirements of this graduate degree program. And it, could be that this practice can be between 3 months to 6 months, depending on the MDP program around the world. So, it starts all of this part of the courses that you'll take. You'll start researching wherever you're going to do that practicum. And then you actually go out to the field. And that's where you spend 3 months or 6 months working with the community, with the government. It depends, right? And one of the important things is, I want to, again, I've said it already, these students work across sectors. They it's very cross-disciplinary. And they are learning because they may come in with their expertise in engineering, but they know nothing about, the community that they're going to be working in, the role of women in that community, the challenges that that community may have in terms of healthcare, et cetera. And so it's, for those that come, it's really have been a very enlightening type of program. So examples, so what do they do? So they come in, almost think of them as consultants that come to a field, to a specific area, and they have to write something. They do, even though they spend 3 months or 6 months in a place, they come out with some kind of report. So it can be a comprehensive cross-disciplinary situation analysis, environmental protection plan, or it can be a climate change and adaptation mitigation strategy. And so, for example, you have this student here who is from Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, and he went, this beautiful scenery. You would say, my God, what, he must have had a ball there, and he probably did, but he was working on climate change. And this was in Fiji. And so he wrote a paper at the end of this, he was there 4 months, perception of climate change and adaptation by smallholder highland farmers in Fiji. So that's, so he went from Ireland to Fiji, and that's what he did. This one is also on climate change. You have the young man there with the red striped shirt, red and white, and he was also writing on climate change, enabling adoption of climate resilient policies in Uganda. And this specific student was from the University of Botswana, working, going to Uganda, also on the continent, and working on that issue. And just other examples, another example of students, the one with the white shirt here is from UCOD in Senegal. And here he's in Ghana, working with a cooperative in Ghana and working on business. So not necessarily climate change, but other areas. Then you have this one also, University of Perdania in Sri Lanka, and they're focused on natural environment and the human impact. So they were doing some kind of, this was the beginning of their field experience. And the reason I included this specific video or this picture is because they're not, it's not just students traveling around the world for having fun and having a good time. The students as well focus internally in their own backyard. And so these are University of Perdania students doing their field experience in Perdania. And that's why I want to share this picture. And this is the same, the girl with the little cat or bear, with the blue cat and bear in the white t-shirt. She's Brazilian, so at the University Federal de Rio de Janeiro, and she's working with the women's cooperative in Rio de Janeiro. So it doesn't, and then the last picture, because I know I'm taking time here. These are students from University of Winnipeg. And so these students, specifically this University of Winnipeg, and the students, they said they wanted to make changes to the program. They didn't necessarily want to go abroad or internationally when they said we have our own issues here in our backyard. And keeping in mind the SDGs, right, and Agenda 2030, it's about, how do we make the global local as well, and looking at global South, global North, because we all have issues, we all have challenges that are opportunities. So these are students working with indigenous cultures in their region. So that is it for now, and I'm sure that we'll have more questions. Let me stop sharing. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Lucia. I love the emphasis on the practice part of your program. And one thing that I was thinking about for all four of your programs is how there are some things that you mentioned about your model and your program where I would place under, okay, that's more, it relates to knowledge versus that's a little bit more about attitude and values as well. So maybe to that end, I will open it up for our first question, which is, so from your work and your perspective, what do you see as being the core elements or dimensions of either climate education and or education for sustainable development more broadly beyond the science knowledge component? So how would you if you can, there's no order for this, so whoever would like to go first, please go ahead.
For me, it's about being, interdisciplinarity is really key, it's really important. So that even if you're just focused on climate change or climate mitigation or adaptation, yes, but you also have to broaden that lens and look at, and it's what we've been hearing all day, yesterday and today, and really look at, the impact of whatever you're doing on other sectors and on other communities, and so I'll stop at there because I see others who probably that can expand on what I'm saying.
I can build on that because I think what I was going to say is kind of similar around the interdisciplinary aspect for sure, but also drawing these connections and making like having the authentic applications, I think is really big, and having students really be able to wrestle with a question that matters to their context and has that authentic impact. Especially, I know climate change is also breeding so much climate anxiety, and for students to be able to do this work and not just learn about it can be really empowering when in the face of something that can be so daunting oftentimes. And so I do think that's a core element for sure, is having this authentic problem to wrestle with. It's a very real challenge, and having these authentic products that students are engaging in that can make a real difference in their lives, their communities, their contexts.
And I think part of that too is that when you provide students opportunity.
Is it just me, Karli? I'm unable to hear you. Can you try? Let me try muting you, and then maybe you could, oh wait, I just unmuted you again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to say, I think the other part of that, providing students opportunities for authentic problem solving and engagement in a local context, is that you're teaching about a global phenomenon, whether it's a sustainable development goal or climate literacy. You're localizing that to something that matters authentically to them. And not only does that provide them opportunities to act on feelings like eco grief or eco anxiety that come with learning about topics like this, but it also can provide a hopeful lens that there is something students can do, and it can motivate and excite them about the future they can build. So instead of teaching climate and climate literacy through a lens of doom and gloom about the impacts and how terrible it's going to be in the future, painting this picture and providing them the opportunity to discover what the world could be if we did something, if they did something in their community, can be a really powerful antidote to the usual feelings that come with learning about climate change. And I think it's especially important to provide that for the young students we work with, but also for adults. When we talk about climate change with adults, people don't want to talk about it because it's a huge bummer. And so painting that picture and reframing the narrative away from terrible impacts towards the future we could create together that is just and verdant and full of life can be much more motivating and powerful for taking action.
Totally. I second everything everybody said. And from the perspective of the humanities, once that interdisciplinarity and actionability sort of come together, then climate becomes a lens through which everybody sees the world, and even things that may seem detached from climate issues suddenly take on this new rich meaning. For instance, I grew up in Iowa on a pig farm in the third leading pork producing county in the nation. And even though that in itself doesn't scream climate, it's connected to all these systems that are ecocidal. So adopting that lens allows young people to see that and defamiliarizes it a little bit.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I, in your responses, you've already hit upon this a little bit, but if you can, I'll share a little bit more, is what has been your experience in your work in the process of going from knowledge to action taking, right? On the part of your students, but I also want to add the part about how about those students also being a part of that larger community so that it can also be collective action taking, right? You have now an individual that is more aware, more mindful of the things that they're learning through your programs, but how do they also become better integrated into that community that they are trying to, you know, affect change in? If you can share a bit about that as well.
I think for us, we really see this happening in the going from the envision and design sprint stage of planning these projects to the enact phase, where teachers are actually implementing these and coming together in this community of practice. And what we're seeing like time and again, I think, is that there are so many challenges, especially to doing like climate education and project-based climate education, where we're like giving so much more agency to students, where like unanticipated challenges arise. So for instance, one of the educators I've been working with has this wonderful, ambitious project of learning in, so he's an educator in China, and his class is looking at how to recycle masks, like the disposable masks that were being worn every single day at this time. And they were partnering with like a factory to go and bring their students in and learn these different processes. And as the course evolves, they come upon a lot of different challenges with actually accessing these factories, or actually like what can the students do there, or when the shutdowns began in China, how can we continue our classes? And this was kind of seen all across our educators, no matter the projects they were working on, being able to have people to keep on talking about your designs with and your projects with, the challenges that came up. I think it's really important, because time and again, we heard educators say like, oh, I really didn't like see this coming. This is a lot harder than I anticipated, and it's not what I had planned. And how can we scale and pivot and adapt? And having that adaptability was even something that they ended up teaching a lot of their students, was how can you, as you implement your own projects, also adapt, and as you come across these barriers as well. So I think for us, this aspect of collaboration, having this support as you do this work, is so important.
Another thing that we've done, so in addition to our students teaching students model, we also provide professional development for teachers. And one of the things we work with them about is to reframe how they think about climate education, because I think a lot of teachers approach this space and see it as an overwhelming challenge of curriculum scarcity, because they're already trying to teach so much and are being held accountable to so many standards that they see adding one more thing as a burden, which it can be. And so pivoting and reframing the way they think about it as an opportunity for authentic engagement with their students and student-directed inquiry, and the way they can use climate change as a lens while doing the things they're already doing, is a much more powerful way to get them started in the process. So instead of trying to take on a big brand new unit or a big brand new project, showing them the little ways they can start to bring this in until they feel comfortable enough to take on something like a student action project that'll take a whole year. Why not think about how you could talk about it in your math class using graphs, or talk about it in an English class using selected readings? And so finding that sweet spot of how can you integrate it to what you're already doing, so that that curriculum scarcity doesn't seem too insurmountable for them.
Okay, in terms of what we do, for us, what has been really key and pivotal is SDG 17, partnerships, right? That's what we're talking about, partnerships, because when we need to do a lot of work in terms of finding the field sites where the students will go, whether they're at home or abroad. And you know, we don't really turn anyone away in terms of any partner that's interested in working with us, be it a government, being an agency, we will engage with them. And so a really good example was that maybe 3-4 years ago, we had the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, come to us, and they're very focused on rural development. So we had, you know, yes, we have all these MDP programs around the world, but I wasn't sure if I would get enough people or students that were interested in rural development, because even though we're doing sustainable development, you know, a lot of them are really focused on cities and other things, not necessarily the rural. But so we had a lot of interest, to my surprise, and a lot of excellent work that occurred. Because of it, they went out to the rural areas. They were out of their comfort zones. They had to, you know, little things that we take for granted, you know, riding a little motorcycle to get to the field site, and, that being the first time and them fearing a lot of times for their life, literally. But it was this partnership. I mean, EFOD really pushed us and pushed the students out of the comfort and said, okay, you've been studying all this great information. You talk a great language of interdisciplinarity and cross-sectoral work and not working in silos. Okay, now we need you to really do it. And can you help us with this situation around, the 226 field sites that they have around the world? So partnership was really key for us.
Mhm. Thank you, Krish.
I'll just add two things briefly. Oh yeah, thank you. Two things briefly. One is that we at the center have been trying to get smarter about giving educators the resources to think about their own adultist biases, which we define as believing a belief that middle-aged adults have all the answers to the solution, and it's okay for young people to come on board and learn too, but follow our lead. And a rejection of that takes young people very seriously. And on the other side of that coin, rejecting ageism and seeing older adults as having a lot to teach us too. And in the experiences I've had working with older adults on climate education, they're angry. They're like really upset. And so bringing those communities together has been really amazing. And I was going to mention this too, but it ties into a question I see in the chat about linking K-12 and higher ed. I think it's incumbent on higher ed folks who are, this is me being in higher ed too, who are overworked, but have this institutional privilege that K-12 folks don't, to create spaces and actively invite K-12 people in, and if possible, to compensate them. We worked with a teacher recently from South Dakota, and they were a mid-career teacher that switched schools, and their salaries $29,000 a year, which is gross. But to the extent that those resources can be shared across, is I think what also leads to action.
Nick, to follow up on that, we in our professional development workshops always assume that our teachers have very limited knowledge of climate science. And so we do an overview so that everyone operates from the same base of knowledge. But what I love is then I have these teachers who are asking me the questions that I would also expect to hear from students, right? These like questions about, well, what about natural variability? Or what about the sun? Or what about this? And what about that? And I love to take that as an opportunity to redirect their thinking for the classroom. Like, so you don't know, turn it back on your students. If you have a student who in your lesson, they're like, well, what about this? I heard this. You don't have to have all the answers as the educator. Learn together with your students, put it back on them and say, that is an awesome question. I want you to research that at home. And then I want you to teach me and all of your classmates what you learned, that this is an excellent lens and opportunity to co-create knowledge with students, that it's not just empty buckets waiting to be filled with knowledge, but an opportunity for them to bring their personal expertise of their lived experiences and whatever they can find through their own inquiry and share it with a community in their classroom, and to allow teachers to live in that space of not knowing and lean into it. Let those students start to direct their own learning and teach you in the process. So it's uncomfortable, but it's climate science and climate literacy is the perfect lens to do that kind of teaching, because there are a lot of unanswered questions or questions that you only know half of, or it's just a really wonderful space to do that kind of learning.
And I want to add to what everybody has been saying, and specifically addressing that question of linking higher ed to K through 12. And I think, one of the voices that I haven't heard here today has been from those in the Model UN world, so Model United Nations world. And if you've done Model UN, which is really stepping into the shoes of UN ambassadors and playing the role of being a UN ambassador and having to decide on an issue, for me, I see that as the perfect sort of communion with the K through 12 and college students, which is what I work with, right? So I'm thinking, to do Model UN, which is, it occurs in the middle school, the high school and college, those Model UNers, whether they're, and the teachers, they need background guides. So why not have the college students, specifically the ones I'm working with, this is the idea that we've been tossing around and thinking about, helping that Model UN community with those background guides, bringing in the knowledge that they have, making sure that whatever is being written in those background guides, which the teachers and the students use, is interdisciplinary. That's not just focused, and because it's Model UN, it will be covering with, it'll be covering these issues, sustainable development, all of these issues we're talking about today. But that's for me a very specific example of how we can sort of link that, the college, for me, college and K through 12.
That's a great concrete example. I was also wondering, I have seen some, high school level initiatives and programs that support that kind of more, climate education focused. Are there, for our younger grades, earlier grades, are there some things that you have seen? And going back to this question that Radhika had posed about creating that continuum, starting even earlier, what are some things that you have seen, or if there's something you can share? And for the rest of our audience, I also invite you to post any questions. You can either raise your hand or put them also in the chat, and we'll be looking out for them. Thank you.
I'll jump in really quick to that question and say, one, this is something I want to get smarter about, is early childhood ed. And two, I want to plug the Institute for Early Childhood Education at the University of Minnesota, and Sheila William Ridge, who runs that program, does a lot of outdoor education as just sort of an expectation for being in that program. And she's been working on this concept with a few other folks called Nearby Nature. So this is, the Institute's on the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus, but the Nearby Nature concept allows very young people to go outside and find nature where it is, and then do education there. And then you can pair that, and this is me thinking through my own lens through the center, pair that with stories, and then that bridges this connection. But I'm really inspired by that, and I want to learn from them.
Okay. Well, I see Dr. Bud McAllister. I see you raising your hand. Please go ahead.
I just want to add to that, the other advantage of working with young people, especially in the United States, as of 2022, young people under 22 were a lot black and brown.
Sorry, Dr.
And every year it's going to get a lot more diverse. So the longer we do this, the majority is going to, my understanding is
but I don't know if it was just for me, but the audio was cutting out.
Climate change. And like the gentleman said, they're angry. So that's the sport.
Thank you for sharing that. I was able to catch only parts of that, but I think you were mentioning the benefits of starting early is also that, as the populations is getting more diverse, we're educating early. So by the time those kids are growing up and we have already captured what we want to, the knowledge that we want to disseminate later in life, they've already started earlier on. I think that was perhaps what you were.
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you for sharing that. Mark Means, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge what Nick just said, because I was saying this. I've taught in my career. I've taught from 2nd to 5th grade, and since I started, I'm also going to plug my organization, Compass Education, which is simple tools for using with anywhere from very, very young children up to, they've used it at the United Nations and in large organizations like that. But when you listen to what the small small children have to say, and you just give them the tools and techniques to be able to express themselves. You can't even believe what the ideas that come, the questions that come out, that you can just build on question after question after question. And it's the questions that matters. It's not about us as educators standing up and knowing all the answers. It's about listening to the questions and then asking more questions to sort of tease out possible solutions or possible steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Are there any other questions? I mean, speaking of different populations, one thing that came to mind earlier in one of our sessions today, one of the participants mentioned that even though, in this space we try to be inclusive, a lot of times the communities that are invested or the ones that we want to include are often left out of our programs, of our conversations, of conferences and events like this. So I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit and ask you how, if you've seen that, the population that we want to include actually not being excluded, whether intentional or not, that does happen. And if you have any thoughts on that, some actions or thoughts that we should all collectively have for our programming and things going forward, I would appreciate any comments that you might have on that as well.
I can kick us off. I think this is definitely an issue for sure, and something that we try to do here with this program, at least, is making it virtual is one way that we really look to be able to have educators from all over the world join us. And to that end, even so, we've had a lot of the educators I'll work with from like Uganda or in Zimbabwe will join in. There's different like connectivity issues or time zones, or I know like there was a really big rainstorm and then we're not able to communicate for a while. So providing different ways to communicate as well and engage. So like I'll record all of our sessions, but also provide like other ways of having reports on paper, like sharing out what's happened in the last couple of weeks with you and sharing that with the entire group so other people can comment and follow up on their process as well, answer questions together. Really, I think beyond that, those little things though, I think, which are very important, but I think even largely, I think a theme that we're hearing across here that I'm really excited about is this idea of like context specificity and really facilitating that. And so when we do our sprints, everything is about what is it that your context needs? What if it's a low cost option, if it's a no cost option. We've had a lot of teachers tell us like my students they don't have a lot that they have access to, and we don't want them to feel like they need to have all these different resources. Usually a lot of the times being green can seem actually very cost intensive in our societies. And so how can we provide these no cost ways for them to engage and take action today? And really encouraging, supporting educators as they design within these specific contexts of their place and their people and their communities is, I think, really important.
That's great.
Similarly, when we developed our MDP program, that was key. We wanted to make sure that we were being that we really were offering anyone who wanted to participate in this MDP program the opportunity to do so. That's why we didn't really focus on, the first MDP program to launch was in 2009 at Columbia University. So we could have just been happy with that and let people supposedly come to us, but we understood that that's not the case. Not everybody can afford the cost of Columbia University. So that's why we decided to really branch it out and make sure that we have one of these MDP programs in as many places as possible. But that still doesn't, that no cost. This will cost money. So whether you're at the, University of Ibadan in Nigeria, which is one of our programs, or even University of Florida, the cost will be there. There will be a little bit something that you will need to pay. So one of the things we decided to do was we created, and I'm sharing this as an invitation to anybody who's interested, we created a course that's called Global Classrooms: Foundations of Sustainable Development. And it's a course that we offer for free online. So again, there is that barrier. If you don't have online access, you're not going to be able to participate. But it's online, and this course is September to December, 14 sessions. Jeffrey Sachs opens it, and he usually closes it, and we address a lot of topics having to do with sustainable development, the SDGs, and many different things. So we have a lot of students, a lot of people, community members who participate in the course that are not necessarily part of the MDP. And that was, in our small way, that was a way of addressing that issue that you just raised on. So thank you.
That's great. Lucia, I don't know if there's a link.
I think Lucy, can you give, I have an internet problem. I did not understand about the course that you are talking about. I don't know if there is a link of that is cool, you can just put on the chat box so that, and then we can catch up from there, because it's very important. Thank you.
We'll do that right now.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to ask as well.
So something that Nick mentioned earlier is that, and it's something we do at the center as well for all our professional development, but we pay our teachers. So they sign up to take our professional development. We pay them a stipend. We give them professional development clock hours, and then we give them free books, and we pay to feed them. Whether they're in person, we pay for their dinner, or if it's virtual, we send them Grubhub credits so they can order their own food. So we really try and make these as accessible as possible. We host them after school hours, and we provide all these resources and money so that hopefully the teachers feel supported and like their time is being well spent. Not only are they learning, but we're just trying to support them in all the ways, giving them curricular resources, feeding them, and then giving them that stipend, hopefully to encourage and support them to come and learn from us. And for our Students Teaching Students program, the Climate Literacy Fellows, here in Spokane, we specifically partner and target Title I schools and schools with the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch. So those schools that are really looking for those hands-on innovative experiences with their students, especially in our neighborhood. So in Spokane, right next to Gonzaga University, is actually the poorest zip code in the state. And so we work really hard with all of the elementary and middle schools right around our neighborhood to make sure that those students are getting these experiences and that their teachers are feeling supported in the classroom. So trying to find ways to value and show our support for teachers in ways that are both monetary and not monetary can really help with that accessibility, as well as holding virtual things. So
oh, that's wonderful to support the teachers in those very concrete financial ways as well. It's so necessary. We're right about to end in terms of our time, but often when we talk about these programs, we talk about the programs, but not always get to hear from the educators more personal side. So I did want to ask our very last question, if you can just very briefly share your thoughts. What is the impact you personally want to see as an educator as a result of your work and your program?
I need to ask a question to Karli. I need to confirm one thing. Based on your program, is it based on in your place, or you have also partnership with the regional, like in Africa or whatever? So I don't understand how you are working with the teachers and how you can build the capacity of the teachers. So how do you do collaboration?
I didn't quite hear that. Did anyone else catch that question?
Elijah, could you?
Yeah, let me repeat again. Huh?
Hey, Elijah, could you?
Yes, I'm asking for the program that you are operating for, based on the teachers' capacity building and the way you pay the teachers and how you work together with the teachers. So I'm asking that, do you have a partnership in regional, or you just base where you people do you have any kind of relationship, collaboration with outside as partners or not?
Yeah, so Gonzaga, we have a school of education that they help support the professional development part, so paying for clock hours. And then we have a relationship at the state level with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and they give us support, they give us money so that we can pay teachers. So we have a lot of partnerships, both at the local and the state level, so that we can support teachers financially. And so that's part of the work we do is getting those funds so we can pay teachers directly for their time.
Thank you. We're running out of time, but I really wanted to hear responses on my last question, so I'm gonna push through for 2 more minutes. Did anyone want to share on that last question? Lucia?
Yes. Haein, I was just going to quickly say, remind us of what is the question, because we've had, if
Right.
you can do it quickly.
So from your perspective as an educator, what is the impact that you personally want to see as a result of your work?
I'm happy to start. So one of the things that we really encourage is that both the students we interact with directly and the teachers that take our professional development come away with the creativity and imagination to imagine the future they want to live in, and are inspired and enthusiastic to take steps to make it happen, whether that's bringing it into their classrooms or doing something at home in their own lives. I don't want them to come away with a sense of impending doom, but an excitement and a creativity to create the world that they want to live in. It's always a bonus if people think science is cool at the end of our lessons, but that's really what we're hoping, is to create a community of people who are striving and moving in the same direction for the world.
I love that. Thank you.
I will echo Karli 100% and say all of that, absolutely. And I think really, like, the idea that this is going to be such a group effort, team effort across the world, every discipline coming together to do this type of work. So having students be able to see and teachers be able to feel confident that this is something they can take on, that they have the skills, the mindset, the knowledge, the support that they need to do this work, not just in the future, but today, whoever they are, whether you're a very young learner or an older learner, all along the lifeline, like being able to do this, it's something that we can all do together. So I think that's part of it, is feeling like this is having those skills to do everything they need to.
Yeah. Quickly, a couple things. I want to see teachers getting paid more. I want to see climate literacy education standards in every state, and climate literacy happening in every classroom every day. Nothing less.
And just for me, quickly, it's as Laura mentioned, to create that world we want is not, for me, just only the responsibilities of the young people or the teachers or the older folks like myself. It's that collective, it's all of us coming together, working on it together. So if we can have more conferences like this one with even more people, including the young ones, that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the information you shared, but also for me personally, even more the hopefulness and the just positive framing of education for sustainable development and climate education that you have shared through your personal experience and also through your programs. It's so appreciated. It was very heartening and so exciting to be a part of this. So thank you so much for everything you shared. For any remaining questions, I will ask you to please use the chat box since we are out of time, so that we can get to our keynote from Ann Nielsen